Hello YouTube, I'm Pilot Stud and welcome back to another video. Now today I'm going to be continuing one of the videos I made just over a week ago on how to increase FPS. I'm going to do a video on how to improve performance on Microsoft Flight Simulator, so stay tuned. Hello YouTube, I'm Pilot Stud and welcome back. If you're new here, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. I do flight training videos, flight sim videos, trip reports and a lot more, so if you love everything about aviation, you've certainly come to the right place. But now let's start talking about some things that you can do to improve your experience on Microsoft Flight Simulator. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about expectations. Now, I've got to admit, it's probably not the best place for me to film a video about performance. Right now, I'm flying over London. Heathrow's just behind me. It's probably one of the most intensive areas you can fly over. But anyway, expectations. Do not expect 60 FPS on a flight simulator. 30 FPS is perfectly fine. In fact, that's what I aim for most of the time. Even though 40 FPS can be nice, it's just a bit smoother. But to be fair, 30 FPS is nice. Now let's talk about ways you can get there. So now we've got over expectations, let's talk about something that I think is very important. Now this is really only if you've got a poor internet connection or a weaker graphics card or less RAM, then I highly recommend you use something called manual cache. Now this is basically where you select the areas you want to download in low, medium or high resolution, and it's actually really good because one, it can increase the quality of places you fly in a lot, and two, it saves loading times. Now obviously if you've got a poor Wi-Fi connection, then stuttering will occur as it tries to load in new areas. Manual cache saves this. It is quite time consuming and also quite space consuming on your PC, so I only recommend you do it in areas you're going to fly to a lot. Now right now I'm showing you how I manual cache many parts of the UK or southern UK, including around my home area and around London Heathrow. Now I did find this increased performance, especially when flying into Heathrow, because normally it is quite laggy. There was still some lag, it doesn't completely get rid of it all because it's still got to load in buildings, but it certainly saved a lot of time when loading up at London City Airport, which is another airport I did in high resolution, and it also improved some performance and stopped some stuttering, which is always nice. Now manual caching is quite easy to do, don't be intimidated, but it can take quite a while if you have a poor internet connection or experience quite a few micro stutters as you're loading in new areas. Let's move on to some more stuff. So before we talk about some other fixes externally, if you haven't seen my video on the best settings to improve your FPS, I'll put a link up the top now. Okay, so one of the first fixes involves going into your files, so let's do it. So you want to find your Flight Simulator EXE application, let's go find it. So my one is installed on my SSD in my Steam library, Steam Apps, Common, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and if we scroll down, we should see it. I've just missed it, there it is. Okay, so right click that, click Properties. Now I've already enabled it. I didn't find too much of a difference. It did stop some micro stutters, which is quite important. So you want to go to Compatibility, and make sure you disable full screen optimizations. Now it doesn't really do much when you're on windowed mode, but if you're on full screen mode, it stops a lot of micro stuttering and generally improves the game. Now we're going to click change high DPI settings. Click on this and then check override high DPI scaling behavior and make sure it is selected on application, not system. Now I'm not a computer scientist, I couldn't tell you what any of this means. I've just done my research, and for me it did stop micro stuttering, so it might help you there. It increases performance, especially when you're flying over busy areas. I believe it does something with the CPU or GPU and stops the system trying to take over from the application, something like that. I'm probably wrong, I'm not too sure, but I found it did make a difference. Now let's talk about some other things. Okay, so you want to pop into your Windows settings and scroll down to gaming. Now this, everyone basically knows this, or at least I hope you would. If you come down to here and click game mode, make sure it is off. This is horrifically optimized. It honestly really does. I mean, I think I gained 5 FPS by turning this off, but depending where you are, you can gain quite a few more. This is really bad. Normally it's on. It's badly optimized for most games. It doesn't really help Flight Simulator at all. Make sure you turn it off. Also go up to captures and make sure once it loads that this is off. Basically background recording, obviously really heavy on your CPU. Obviously if you want to record gameplay then you might want to keep it on, but I'd recommend turning it off. This does really affect CPU and GPU usage. Now let's talk about some more internal settings. Okay, so these final things I'm going to tell you that can increase performance might seem very obvious to some people, but to others you might not really understand it. So if we click flight conditions, if you are getting bad FPS with weather, turn off live weather, sometimes it's on. Obviously, the more clouds, the more volumetric clouds, the lower your FPS are going to be, the worse your performance, because clouds are incredibly heavy. Therefore, I only recommend using live weather if you really want to. It's more personal preference really, shouldn't affect it too much, but normally for me, if I just want to fly, I'll keep it on clear skies, sometimes a few clouds, but I do obviously fly in rain and snow sometimes, and obviously with live weather. But yes, live weather is incredibly heavy normally, because it is drawing from your internet, so if you've got a bad internet connection anyway, you might want to turn it off. Now let's talk about multiplayer. I was quite annoyed about multiplayer really, because it is really heavy on FPS, at least especially for me when I'm at large airports. So I recommend, if you want to fly with your friends, obviously choose group only as opposed to going for all players, because all players absolutely kills my computer. I went down from 40 to 5 FPS at Innsbruck, saying that there was around like 50 aircraft there, so it didn't surprise me. But all players, if you're experiencing low performance or bad performance, turn all players off and go to off/group only. Sometimes live players is better, it just depends on demand and traffic at the time. Now I really like the live traffic feature. I don't find normally, as long as you're not at a too busy airport, that it affects FPS and performance. So I like to keep live traffic on, but if this is bad for you, then swap over to AI, and then you can swap the density in settings like you could on FSX. Now I've already spoke about live weather and time. You can make it live time, which is perfectly understandable, but live weather is quite demanding, especially when it's bad weather outside, because generally the more clouds there are, the worse the performance is. So let me run through some of the stuff. Who have we got here? We've got a British Airways flight here, 25907. So let me just recap what we've gone through. Basically, don't expect too much of a flight simulator, especially if you've only got a medium range PC. Most people on high systems with a 2080 Ti etc. don't even reach 60 FPS on their settings, primarily because they don't need it. 30 to 40 FPS is perfectly acceptable. So I've talked about some of the system optimizations you can have, like swapping some properties in the flightsimulator.exe file. That does help, and make sure you turn game mode off. You should see quite a good FPS boost or performance boost after that. Now also, if you're experiencing bad performance, make sure you turn live weather off. It's incredibly demanding. And also remember to not fly in overly busy areas on multiplayer, because multiplayer is badly optimized and drains your system. So I hope some of these things have helped you guys. If you enjoyed, please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and feel free to give feedback in the comments. Thanks to all my captains as always, but from me today, that is all. Bye bye.